lot of our mind is geared towards either caring for other people or chasing after our job or, pressures for deadlines and all of that stuff. And just taking that time to do a yoga stretch or to do 2 minutes of abdominal breathing or put your hands on your heart or put your hands on your feet and massage them. It's really, you're telling yourself through those acts that you're important, that you matter. And that intention is very powerful.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, where you can find a large selection of Om and yoga clothing, spiritual jewelry, and unique fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now here's your host, Ashton Sabo.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Savannah Podcast. We've got another fascinating show in store for you today. But before we dive into our topic, I want to make sure that you remember to go over to savannahspirit.com/contest to enter in to our weekly contest. Every week there's a new prize, so each and every week you can go back and enter in again to hopefully win the prize. So I'm really excited about our topic today. We're going to be talking about a more integrative approach to medicine. How can we take what we know through Western medicine and incorporate more ideas, more modalities, greater ways of thinking about the body instead of just limiting it to physical interactions? How can we look at energetic systems, emotional systems, mental systems, and bring it together cohesively so that people can achieve optimal health? Our guest today is Dr. Rose Kumar, who is a doctor of internal medicine and the author of Becoming Real, Reclaiming Your Health in Midlife. She's also the founder and director of the Ommani Center for Integrative Medicine in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. Dr. Rose Kumar, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashton, for having me.
We're excited to have you. Now, you are a Western doctor. You started the Ommani Center for Integrative Medicine, which has acupuncture, traditional Western medicine, homeopathy, Jungian psychology, Reiki, yoga, massage, all these different modalities. Were you always interested in all these other modalities, or were you drawn to them in particular to have them in your center because of something you felt was missing in the Western approach?
Well, I grew up in India, Ashton, and in India there's a much more varied context of healing and health. Food is central to healing in India, in that Indian Eastern tradition. And homeopathy and massage and Ayurveda, all of those practices are pretty mainstream out there. So I grew up really with all of these practices is part of my consciousness, I believe. And when I moved to the U.S., I was 16 and had the medical school traditional trajectory and brought my psyche with me into medical school. And it felt really extremely narrow. The context felt very narrow to me. So when I started to explore my patient histories and what brought them into this illness that they were having and what could possibly work for them to heal the illness versus just suppress symptoms or manage it, it just was a natural extension for me. So I feel like I came this way, and it's just a better way to practice medicine. It's a better way to come to a place of healing and curing an illness and to exploring the causes of illness. Our traditional system doesn't really do that. It looks for the molecular mechanisms or physiological mechanisms, but it really doesn't look for the cause. And so therefore we can't heal anything if we don't know what's causing it.
And how do all these modalities, because many of them have, in essence, grown up in their own isolated bubble, but you're integrating them all in your center. How do they all work together to really help people achieve more optimal health?
Well, it's a great question. As I progressed in my medical training as well as in my practice of medicine, what I recognized are patterns that we all carry. And I really look at the body as a four-body system. So the body really is not just a physical body, as we all know. We have a physical body, we have a mental body, we have an emotional body, and we have an energy body. And some of the modalities in the East really address the energetic system of the body. You know, Einstein said it correctly, E equals MC squared. So energy and mass are equivalent. And so what happens energetically in our system affects our physical body. I mean, we've seen so much research in the field of psychoneuroimmunology and the effects that we've shown in medicine in clinical studies on belief, the biology of belief, the biology of attitude, the biology of perspective, the mind, the emotions, all impact health. And so for me, it was important to find a logical framework so that me as a physician, as a scientist, could really triage people and understand, you know, where the origination of the disease is coming from. And a lot of times it's the energetic system. So the energetic system, if I may, it consists of four different energetic systems: the constitutional system, the subtle body, the meridian system, and the electrical system. And I'll give an example of, say, the electrical system. It's an easy example, and it'll make sense to people. So the electrical system is, our body is made up of electricity. The electricity runs our cardiovascular system. We have a heartbeat. We have an electric rhythm. The electrical system runs our nervous system. You can measure impulses that run down the nerves through an EMG or an EEG, I would say. And the muscles have an electrical signal. So when the nerves send electricity to the muscles contract. And so we're created as an electrical system. That is one of our bodies. The Heart Math in Santa Cruz actually showed, the Institute of Heart Math showed that you can actually modulate the electrical system with your thoughts. So they were able to find that we have 8 feet out of our body, with a galvanometer, we can measure electrical activity. So when we're with each other, we're in each other's electrical fields. So what happens is that when we're under stress, that electrical system gets staticky, if you will. And it affects how we feel, and it also affects our biology. And so if you look at how flower essences work, for example, let's take the flower essence Star of Bethlehem. Star of Bethlehem is a really hardy flower. It grows in very difficult, arid conditions. And when Dr. Bach years ago noticed intuitively that nature has certain characteristics that could actually offer help to the human body, he took the flower of the Star of Bethlehem and made an essence out of it and gave it to people who were traumatized. And what he found is that these trauma cases felt better. They felt more grounded. They felt less stressed. And so the establishment of an understanding of something deeper than just the physical body began to occur in this electrical framework. Mm-hmm. So when a person goes through trauma or fright or a sudden loss or an accident, Star of Bethlehem is a really great flower essence to take to balance that electrical system so that they don't feel the stress. Mm-hmm. And this can actually be measured, like Heart Math has measured the heart rate variability when people are stressed and when people are not stressed, and have been able to show that there's a specific electrical variability that changes in that case. Mm-hmm. So this may be more complicated than what people want to hear, but the bottom line is that in the energetic system, the electrical component is really an important component to address, which we don't address in healthcare. When a patient comes in to see me who's been traumatized or who's been in an accident, this is one of the things that I do is I put them on Star of Bethlehem, and then I get busy taking care of them through physical therapy, massage, or acupuncture, but the electrical system is not ignored. So that's a deeper body that's being addressed in addition to the physical symptoms that people have after an accident or trauma. And that creates a more integrative approach.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the electricity model makes a lot of sense. I know, so I live more in the woods now than I have since I've ever been back in the United States. And a few months ago, I was paying for this really expensive internet, and I was never getting the speeds that I wanted. And so we had the people come out. It turns out that someone down the line had water coming into their line, which is putting static in the rest of all the other lines down the line. So my internet was never up to speed because of that static somewhere else. And so as you were talking, that was coming back to me like, yeah, that it's the same thing when there's static in our own electric system, that we're not running optimally. We're not really communicating optimally in the body. So it definitely makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. So, this is one way that we, scientists that think inside the box, that think about the physiological and molecular mechanisms, need to take it deeper and to see how these mechanisms are affected by deeper levels of who we are, which is not addressed in the traditional medical model. So people really get, for example, in my traditional training, I was taught, this person had an accident, send them to PT, give them some non-steroidals like Advil or ibuprofen and push them out the door, or maybe a muscle relaxer. But those patients started to come back later with anxiety, and they couldn't sleep at night, and they were replaying the accident in their head. And then, of course, the treatment of choice was an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety drug. So you can see that the management of the symptom and the depth of triage was really not there. And the management of the symptom wasn't enough because that electrical static was coming in through the mental body as anxiety. Mm-hmm. And so something as simple as acknowledging that there's trauma in the body and treating it with a complementary modality. We call it complementary in our culture, but it's really not complementary in other cultures. This is more traditional in other cultures, can help a lot. And I've certainly seen that in my practice. And this is just one small example.
Well, and I love that too. I've practiced body work for over 20 years. I did it for over 10 years professionally. And anyone that's in body work long enough knows is that people store emotional trauma in their bodies. It's not just a physical, we can look under a scan and see that, there's this type of damage to the tissues. People hold trauma. And if you don't acknowledge it, it gets perverted and comes out in other ways, as you said, through anxiety, or they can't sleep, or pains in the place or elsewhere. And it's so important to address that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I kind of see the body, if you look at the 4-body system, as physical, mental, emotional, energetic. I see it as if you take the water molecule, it's the same molecule, but it has different densities. Ice, water, steam. So the emotional mental body is more like steam, or the energetic body. The emotional body is more like water, actually. Water and emotions have always been aligned especially in Jungian analysis. And the body is like the physical, the ice of that molecule. So we have strata to us. We have layers to us that we need to address, and we need to really own the fact that we're more than just a physical body. Mm-hmm. And the more we can understand and recognize that there are different levels to us, and they also need to be addressed, the more aligned and integrated we can feel, and the healthier we can be. Because in our culture, we really shut down the emotional body. People aren't allowed to grieve. People are not allowed to express their feelings. So grief that gets stuck turns into depression. Stress that gets stuck turns into depression. And then what do? We put a pill in them. Well, the pill's not going to really help them process their grief or depression. So I think that the deeper issues are that our physical body is impacted by our emotional body, and we need to start to address our feelings and create safety to address that with each other. And it's just not culturally recognized or normalized yet.
What do you see as the biggest issue when it comes to people's personal health? Is it that the emotional body isn't recognized? Is there something, you've talked about the health of food and things like that. What do you see as the big thing, especially in the West, that's really affecting people?
I think one of the things that I find drives the people that I see. For example, I've seen close to 50,000 patients in the last 16 years, and about 120,000 in the last 30 that I've been in practice. Is what I see is the emotional body that is unrecognized and compensated for. That a person starts developing these habits to cover over their emotions, or, how many times do we call it emotional eating? We eat emotionally, we're checked out, we're tranced out, we're in limbic drive, in survival. And so we don't bring consciousness to what we're eating. We listen to the internet, we listen to the next fad about food, and we eat what's normalized. Well, what's normalized is really not healthy. It's not working for our country. So really, I think there's several areas that we need to really pay attention to. One is conscious eating, and really looking at what parts of the world are the healthiest and mimic that rather than the next fad. Plant-based diet we know works. There's enough scientific evidence to show that. We know organic is better. We've seen the research. There's plenty of research on the benefits of organic food versus conventional food. And now the studies are showing that even traces of pesticides are increasing cancer risk. It's very dangerous for the body because the body doesn't know what to do with those pesticides. They're hormone disruptors and they're carcinogens, and they have a cumulative effect. So, in my practice, I really emphasize a couple of things for health, and it's worked for years and years. One is a plant-based organic diet. I encourage people to stay away from alcohol because alcohol is a neurotoxin, and it also is a carcinogen. It increases the body's manifestation of 7 different cancers in the body, and this is recently published a review article in the last couple of months. And our country, we'll have our steak and our alcohol and think that we're actually doing ourselves a favor, but actually we're not. So the diet is a very, very important piece that helps the body maintain proper function. If done well, a correct probiotic is really critical because we know that the flora in the intestine is essential for health. And then addressing the emotional needs is really critical because we don't really have a larger context for growth and shifts that we have to make. The conscious shifts we have to make as we grow older. The soul is not really addressed in our society. And really, I think what we need to look at is how are we viewing life? What is our perspective of life? And to reframe it with consciousness and learning from other cultures and incorporating the contexts that make our life richer and more aligned with our soul, our self, our authentic self. That is really what I believe can restore our health and the health of our country.
You mentioned the gut earlier too, and you wrote an article back in August of last year on the Huffington Post about the power of the gut. How important is the gut in our digestive system in our overall health?
Well, the gut is probably at the heart of everything, and the NIH has spent, the National Institutes of Health spent about $1 billion in microbiome research. That's how important this this topic is. And the issue is, why have Americans become more obese? I mean, there's many answers to that. But one of the key answers is that when GMO foods were introduced into our country about 25 years ago, our microbiome started to change. And the biome in America is very different than the biome in other countries, particularly Europe and Africa. And so some of the research has shown that our biome has shifted. Now, the biome is about 150 trillion organisms that inhabit our gastrointestinal system. Those organisms have critical functions. One function is to modulate the permeability of our intestine. And why is that important?
And is that to say, for people that might not understand, like how much nutrients or what things are being absorbed?
What's being absorbed, the absorbability of nutrients and calories in our intestine. So the intestine draws the nutrition it's supposed to draw nutrition out of your food and put it in your bloodstream. So that's basically in an easy way, a good way to understand what the small intestine does. Well, the biome, the bacteria in the small intestine, regulate that. So if the biome is not correct, we will absorb more calories, less nutrients, and a lot bigger proteins like gluten into our bloodstream. And a lot of the proteins that aren't supposed to be absorbed because the biome is incorrect are foreign proteins in our blood. So the body sees the proteins as foreign. The body creates a attack against those proteins, and that process creates a lot of inflammation in the body. But it's not just limited to the body. It also affects the blood-brain barrier and the brain, so the brain gets inflamed as well. And unless that small intestinal permeability, that the bacteria is corrected, that cycle continues. And then over time, the immune system gets like what's called upregulated. It starts to react, and chemical sensitivities develop, multiple food sensitivities develop, autoimmune disease develops, and a lot of inflammation develops. And dementia is also thought to be highly correlated to this particular process. So that's one piece to the puzzle. This is called leaky gut. If there's the wrong biome and you're filtering out the bad, big proteins and lots of calories, few nutrients into your bloodstream, that's called leaky gut. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that term. The second thing that's really critical that the microbiome does is it basically supports your nervous system. 90% of your serotonin and a lot of the neurotransmitters that affect the functioning of your brain and your mood are synthesized or created by that biome. So the type of bacteria in the biome is critical for healthy function. And so when we drink, say, our diet soda or food coloring-based foods or processed foods or GMO foods, the biome dies because the biome is dependent upon nature. We're made of nature. The biome depends on nature. So, changing the diet, taking a really good broad-spectrum probiotic, and eating a little bit of fermented food, daily or every other day, will do a lot to restore mood. It'll do a lot to reduce inflammation and to prevent Alzheimer's disease or dementia. And a lot of this, when done early, is reversible. So that piece to the puzzle is really important.
When it comes to probiotics, I've read a lot of mixed things with them. In part, now you kind of touched on it there of the fermented foods and the change in the diet, because most of the criticism that I hear about probiotics is that you can be taking all the probiotics in the world if the actual environment in your gut isn't appropriate, then it's like taking expensive vitamins that you just pee out anyways. Like they're just, nothing can be allowed to grow, so that that in truth, it's more about the inner environment, which comes from diet than having to supplement with these things. Like if you had to choose one or the other, hopefully we could do them all, but how important the diet is in creating the environment for the good bacteria to grow.
Exactly. I mean, the probiotic I find is really important, but more important than that is the diet. Because once nature enters the body responds. And that's just the way we used to be. So, I mean, and that's the way we're constructed. We're not really constructed for supplements, although a lot of them do have some very good effects on the body. But they're supplements. They're not meant to be replacements for a healthy diet.
Now, in your work, do you see a lot of health problems because of age, or do you see them because of poor habits extended over time? Because I know part of your book as well is dealing with midlife aging stuff. And I always wonder, because to me, while there is a natural process of degeneration through age, most of the issues that I see in people that they blame on age are really is because, well, you've had this really poor habit for the past 2 decades. So of course it's going to have a consequence. Mm-hmm. What do you notice in your work in terms of, is age the culprit, or is it the poor habits that are the culprit?
Well, I think it's, if I were to pick one, it would be the poor habits. And the aging process, I mean, we're all aging every day. And as we age, there's something in midlife that occurs, and I've really explained a lot of that in the book. But the key piece in midlife that I've noticed, I mean, I'm 55 and I'm postmenopausal, and what I've discovered, even in myself and of course in the thousands of patients that I see, is that as we age, we become more sensitive. So the hormones shift, and that creates a sensitivity. So what we were doing in our 20s, we can't get away with in our 50s. We really need to shift and change and alter our habits to be more and more and more and more pure through the aging process, because the degeneration process is really speeding up in the American people. And we want that degeneration process to slow down. We want to continue to regenerate. For example, I mean, a side issue that many researchers have found is that the length of strands of genes that hang down from the chromosomes are called telomeres. And what they found is that the telomere length shortens as we age. Well, they also found that the telomere length is affected by the foods you eat and the lifestyle. So if you look at the telomere length in, say, a 15-year-old kid who is overweight, eating a lot of processed foods and drinking diet soda, it's equivalent to the telomere length in, say, a healthy 60-year-old.
Wow.
So if the 15-year-old has the cell age of a 60-year-old person, how many years does that child have left to live? And so cell age, that child has degenerated into a 60-year-old's body at age 15. And if they don't change their diet and they don't lengthen those telomeres and bring regeneration back into their body, their outcome, their prognosis is not very good in 30 years. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I think that the whole process of aging is not as linear as we thought it was. It's more about keeping your cells healthy as you age, doing what the body needs as you age, reducing the impact, the assault of our cultural, the culture mother's expectations, creating more balance, breathing more, exercising more and appropriately for your body, and finding that sweet spot between self-care and work, adding more plants, taking out the neurotoxins, adding the supplements that are going to enhance your health. I can tell you that at 55, I feel healthier than I've ever felt. And I'm doing everything that I'm telling you that I tell my patients to do. And so I'm creating this aging population in Wisconsin, in my neck of the woods, that are aging really well and are not developing the chronic diseases that the average American person on the average American diet has. So it's a really good question, Ashton, and it's a really important question for people to take heed of.
Well, and so, I mean, for people that aren't in Wisconsin or don't have these integrative type centers that are taking different modalities accessible to them, where do they start? Like, how can they start to learn more about this when they might not have the specific support directly within their community?
Well, one of the things I'm in the process of developing is a learning platform, because I have the same question that you are asking in my mind every day. So I want to provide that for people that aren't in Wisconsin or aren't part of the Ommani Center. So I'm going to develop this platform and make it really easily available to anybody through a web learning platform. What I would suggest for people to do is clearly to read the blogs that I write. I'm constantly educating. There's a lot of information on my website. But also, if you're going to start somewhere, start with beginning to increase the organic plants in your diet. A plant-based diet consists of, vegetables, fruit, nuts, olive oil, lentils, beans, legumes. I mean, the choices are endless. And just start increasing those in your diet and begin doing some form of aerobic exercise, even if it's power walking for 20 minutes a day, oxygenating your body through a plant-based diet and oxygenating your body through exercise. You don't need an integrative clinic to help you do that. That's something that anybody can do. So that's a really good place for people to start.
Well, and you mentioned earlier self-care, and you've touched on a lot of really great things that people can do in a broad sense. Could you give our listeners perhaps 2 or 3 really practical, like they can do them when they're done listening to the podcast kind of stuff, of just self-care tips that they can integrate into their lives? You mentioned the organic foods and stuff, so perhaps something separate from that would be easy for anyone to start to adapt.
Well, a really good self-care technique that makes a big difference in the body, particularly when under stress, is abdominal breathing. And me being a science nerd, I really like the mechanism of things. So what abdominal breathing, what you do, and you can go to YouTube and look up how to do abdominal breathing. And just briefly, what you do is when you take a deep breath, you expand your trunk. You expand your belly when you're abdominal breathing. You, as a yoga teacher, you do this all the time. This is part of the yogic breathing. And so what happens is when you expand your belly rather than contracting it when you breathe in, you cause the diaphragm, which separates your abdomen from your chest, to move downward. You increase the chest cavity, you increase the aeration of your lungs, and the diaphragm moves down to create more space in the chest when your belly goes out, when you breathe in. When that happens, there's a nerve underneath the diaphragm called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve produces a hormone called acetylcholine, which is an antidote for adrenaline. When we're under stress, we're producing adrenaline and cortisol, 2 hormones that are necessary but over time become toxic to the body. And what the acetylcholine does is it basically relaxes the body. It slows down the heart rate, it reduces blood pressure, it brings calmness to the brain. Meditators have more acetylcholine in their body than adrenaline. And so if everybody did maybe 5 minutes of abdominal breathing every day, that's a really great self-care technique. So that's one thing that anybody can do. I recommend a massage at least once a month for everyone. Body work, as you know, is really, really important to release stress from the body because we hold stress in our muscles, and that is a really good self-care technique. A third thing that people can do clearly is exercise, being in nature. We are surrounded by a high-tech pressure society, electromagnetic radiation, all kinds of stuff that agitates our system. And there's nothing like being in nature to bring peace to the system, because the system starts to connect and align with the natural order of things. And then that really is an enriching way that a person can do self-care. So, these three things everybody can do. Everyone has access to nature. We're breathing all the time anyways, so everyone has access to doing abdominal breathing. And in today's day and age, everyone has access to a massage therapist. So those are three things that I would really recommend for a good start for doing self-care.
Well, and to touch on massage for a moment, so one of the things that I miss most, I lived in Thailand for a number of years, and there, Thai massage was everywhere, and it was ridiculously cheap. So you could, I literally, every other day probably, I'd go get a Thai massage. Here, massage is expensive in most places, but one of the things that we can take from that is in Thailand, for example, massage is part of the culture within a family. So almost every family has someone who's the expert Thai massage therapist, but because it's always been around, people are massaging each other all the time. We have weekly family massage times in our house where we take turns rubbing each other's feet and shoulders and doing simple things that even just that element of touch, even without any training, is a wonderful thing for the nervous system. It builds connections. I'm sure it's releasing oxytocin, all these amazing things that you don't need to, while it's great to purchase a massage and go somewhere, and I support that. If people are worried about funds, this is something you can do with friends, with family. If it feels good to you to give, it's feeling good to receive it, and vice versa. So no one needs to worry about having an actual therapist to do it, but rather you just start allow it in appropriate ways with people that you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ashton. And one of the ways that people can actually do it, if you're single and you don't have someone to do a massage on you, do it on yourself. Mm-hmm. Take your feet and get some massage oil and massage your feet with that. And it's amazing what you can do just with yourself. Because what it is part of it is the intention of caring for yourself. And frankly, I don't think that we have enough of that in our consciousness as a collective. Mm-hmm. A lot of our mind is geared towards either caring for other people or chasing after our job or, pressures for deadlines and all of that stuff. And just taking that time to do a yoga stretch or to do 2 minutes of abdominal breathing or put your hands on your heart or put your hands on your feet and massage them, it's really you're telling yourself through those acts that you're important, that you matter. And that intention is very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, as someone who spent significant time, I grew up in this country, but I spent significant time away from this country and then coming back, to recognize how completely embedded in our culture the idea of you have to work more and you have to hustle more. If you're not succeeding, it's because you're not hustling enough. And it's hard to find time for self-care when everyone around you is saying well, you can't get a massage right now. As you mentioned, you got that deadline, you got that thing that you have to do. But the paradox there is that situation makes it even more critical and important to be doing self-care.
Yes, absolutely. And and I think that people are finding more and more that rat race mentality is bad for us. It's not working. And so a lot of people are simplifying, they're downsizing, they're really starting to see what's really important. What's important? We're not going to take that rat race with us when we die. We don't take anything with us when we die except how we've grown, how our soul has connected with other souls. What is the meaning that we've lived for or died with or left? And so that's really the key thing that I believe there's more of a grassroots movement towards exploring that dimension of who we are and what we're doing on Earth. And, all the rat races, it's on Earth, we've always had the shadow side. And I think the shadow side has kind of reached ahead at this point in history. And we all have to start to make other choices. I can tell you that in my practice, I see more and more and more people leaving the systems and going into practice for themselves, either as therapists or physicians or, entrepreneurs or artists. And they're reducing their need for stuff to the point where they can actually live as minimalists and go after meaning. And there's just something about living for meaning where I feel Providence steps in. And it aids us and it helps us and it creates the synchronicities and this is what I did. At 37, I left the medical system. I couldn't stand the corporate mentality. It was very dehumanizing for both physicians and patients. And I put everything I owned as collateral to take out a loan and open the Ommani Center. It was a very fearful time for me. It was frightening to do this, but I had no other choice. I knew I could not work in that system. And I knew that the kind of integrity I was looking for in the medical system did not exist. I had to create it. And so that's what I did 16 years ago, almost to the day. The 19th of February would be the 16th year anniversary for the Ommani Center. And this is what people are doing more and more because we're finding that the rat race is not giving us a sense of meaning. And I think that, human beings, we are enriched by meaning. We're enriched in community. We're enriched by things that we do and say and behave that align with our soul. And I feel that we're turning back to what's important. We're turning towards the inner life and what's more important. Your life is a testament to that. My life is a testament to that. There's so many people that are turning towards that particular value system.
Well, it makes me really happy to know that there are doctors like yourself doing this work, Western doctors that are expanding the range of possibilities and modalities to really come to a greater understanding of health. And in this age of over-specialization and things and not the dots not getting connected, it's really exciting to know that there are people such as yourself doing the work that you're doing. And it gives me a lot of hope that we can move in a direction that is much more supportive, not only for the patient, but as you mentioned, for the doctors as well, and how they are approaching everything. So it's really exciting time. Where you've mentioned your website and things like that. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, you could go to www.ommanicenter.com, and that's OMMANICENTER.com. It's a very comprehensive website. I have a very prolific blog. I publish a lot on the Huffington Post and on Thrive Global, medium.com. There's 2 articles. The second article coming out on Shivana East, and so there's a lot of information. There's videos out there, and as I said, I'm creating this platform that should be probably going live this summer. So, please, I encourage people to watch the things that I've put on there, read what I've put on there, and be inspired, because we are the people that are going to create the change. Also, my book is available on Amazon. It's available as a Kindle as well as a paperback. And if you're 35 and older, it's a must read, because what I've created in this book is a framework for how to live as we're aging, and to help women particularly as well as men. This is a woman's voice because I'm a woman, but my male patients have told me that this applies to them as well, is what is happening in our 4-body system as we are aging, as we're going through midlife, and how do we take care of ourselves, and how do we align with our authentic self, which is why the book is called Becoming Real, because that's what we need. We need to become real and participate in creating the culture that we want to live in. So www.ommanicenter.com, And I'm available to do phone consults for people that aren't in Wisconsin. I'm always happy to do that. That's not covered by insurance, but I can certainly be that coach or that person that helps put it together wherever you live.
Wonderful. Well, and of course, the website will be in the show notes for anyone that is driving or don't have hands-free right now while they're listening to the podcast. That will be in the description and everything else. Dr. Kumar, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your passion. As I mentioned, it really makes me excited to know that there are doctors like yourself out there. So thank you not only for coming on the show, but for the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Ashton.
For all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I hope you've learned something new. Please go check out Dr. Kumar's website and the Ommani Center. I hope you all have a very present moment. Namaste. Hey everybody, it's Ashton here with an announcement. We're starting a weekly contest giveaway over at Savannah Spirit. If you'd like to enter into the contest to win one of our weekly prizes, go to savannahspirit.com/contest. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast today, we'd really appreciate it if you went over to iTunes, left us a review, leave us some comments, and share this podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. Also want to invite you to go check out Savannah East, which is the name of our blog and also the name of a Facebook group where I interact with guests and our audience. We'll post recent episodes up there as well as interesting articles relating to our guests and or the topics on the shows. And again, thank you so much for listening. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaheast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.